welcome to The List Makers, a spin-off from The Doctor Who Show, episode 48. Rob.
Yes?
Hello.
Hello, Dave.
You're Rob. I'm Dave. We didn't do that bit.
It is I.
That's okay. I'm sure the listeners know who we are by now. And this is, of course, episode 48, sent in by listener, friend of the podcast, Dylan Rees, from, of course, the Too Hot for TV podcast, which we've both guested on in the past, Rob.
We have.
And the topic he has given us, appropriate given the content of his podcast, is top 5 extended universe stories that should be made for TV.
Yes.
Now, this one was a challenge because of the so many different ways you could approach it, so many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of options. Given that we have all of the extended universe, all of the books, the audios, the movies, the comics, the plays, everything out there, Rob.
Yeah.
What is the probability we'll snap on our 5?
I think I'm reasonably vanilla with my list tonight, Dave, and there's a reason for that which I might talk about after we do the lists. So I think there's a possibility of 1 or 2, perhaps, even though there are hundreds to choose from.
Interesting. I'm looking at mine. Oh, you know what? I'm going to put my $5 on the table and say this is going to be snap-free.
Okay.
I've put my imaginary $5 on the table.
Wow.
Let's see if we go snap-free. We'll find out in a moment because, Rob, as always, I'll let you make your list uninterrupted and then we'll chat, but your turn to make your list.
All right, Dave. In at number 5, The Iron Legion is a classic Doctor Who weekly comic strip by Pat Mills and John Wagner with artwork by Dave Gibbons, who'd, of course, go on to draw things like Watchmen. And I've got it here because it's really imaginative, and even more than that, it's a touch bonkers. We basically have the Fourth Doctor land on an alternate Earth where the Roman Empire has just continued on and on and on, and it's now expanded out into the galaxy with robot centurions. So just from that brief description, I think listeners can tell we're talking about something that's pretty rich in its scale and its ambition, and probably impossible to capture properly, even with the higher budgets of the Disney Plus deal or whoever's going to be doing Doctor Who in the future. Big Finish has apparently done an audio of it, but I feel that's missing the point somewhat because this was all about spectacle in the comic book. So that's my number 5 pick.
Nice.
In at number 4, I've got the EDA Alien Bodies. This is admittedly a real fantasy pick because extended universe stories being adapted into TV episodes are rare, even when it's worked really well in the past with something like Human Nature. I think that should have set a precedent for adapting more novels or more audios every season of Doctor Who, but I digress. Add to that the fact that Mad Lawrence Miles has had a, shall we say, complicated relationship with just about anyone who could have helped push his work forward over the years.
Yep.
And it's safe to say his stories will never see a TV run. But just imagine for a moment if we could have got Faction Paradox into the series. I mean, wow. Alien Bodies is packed with all these high concept ideas. It's a story that could push the boundaries of what Doctor Who can be on TV. And I would have loved to have seen it explored in a visual format. In at number 3, I've got The Chimes of Midnight, the Big Finish audio. And this is widely regarded as one of the best Doctor Who stories that was never made for television. So it is a no-brainer that it's on my list here. It's written by Rob Shearman and can be summed up, if you've never heard of it, as a Christmas ghost story. For the 8th Doctor and Charlie Pollard, they investigate some weird murders in an Edwardian manor house on Christmas Eve. And the narrative uses a time paradox at its core, so it's deeply Doctor Who, as well as being that very traditional ghost story for Christmas sort of thing, which is a big deal in the UK, but not so much here because we're in the middle of summer and Christmas just isn't dark or scary. It's perfect for a cold, wintry night, so Aussies, if you've never heard this, listen to it in the middle of the year. And if it was ever to be a Christmas episode on TV, I mean, wow. It's just so different to the kind of stuff we've been getting, even compared to the Christmas special we've just had with Ncuti Gatwa and Nicola Coughlan and co. It would just blow viewers' doors off if they did something like this as a Christmas special. It would be amazing.
Right, I haven't heard it, so I'll have to check it out.
Oh my God, okay, yeah. So I just asked, why don't they do this as a Christmas special? In at number 2, I've got Lungbarrow. And if Doctor Who ever needed to delve into an origin story, and whether it needed to is a whole different debate altogether, Lung Barrow was obviously the way to go. For the uninitiated, the novel presents the idea that the Doctor has a soul, or the DNA, call it what you like, of this famous ancient Time Lord, but crucially isn't that Time Lord. So it reinforces that the first Doctor truly was the first Doctor, and it honours the idea that he grew up as an unremarkable sort of Time Lord, as was hinted at in the series, particularly from Tom Baker's era on, where he talked about his life on Gallifrey. He was never the toppermost of the poppermost. He was an average sort of student. Compare this to the Timeless Children, where the Doctor, well, the first Doctor was no longer the first Doctor, and the Doctor's origins were completely redefined for no real gain, no real reason. You know, they're not even from Gallifrey anymore. Lung Barrow does the job of a backstory with far more skill, and for me, it's a much stronger take if you have to do a backstory for the Doctor.
Number one, what's going to be?
Number one, I've got the Big Finish Audio Spare Parts. This might be a cliche, but there's a reason Spare Parts consistently gets rave reviews. You know, when everyone you know talks about a book or a comic or a movie, and they talk about it endlessly, and it feels like, you know, they're all under mass hypnosis. You know, they can't all think this is good. It's usually a sign that something's good. And Spare Parts is no exception. As I've mentioned before, when World Enough and Time had those scenes with the prototype Cybermen, I was sitting there thinking, how are they not crediting Mark Platt with this? Because Mark Platt wrote Spare Parts. Because it just reinforced how strong an adaptation of Spare Parts could be. If you've never heard the audio, but you're familiar with World Enough and Time, think back to all that body horror, the rundown town, the old hospital, all of that. Did you enjoy that? You know, if so, Spare Parts is filled with that same gritty atmosphere. It's really bloody good. I love it.
Wow, that's quite a list.
Thank you. Any snaps?
Let's leave that for let's leave that as a mystery for a few moments. Let's
Okay.
let it be revealed as I reveal my list.
All right.
Now, Rob, my turn to make my list. I've got to say, when I was making this list, this was one of those topics where I just sort of started throwing out ideas on the page, as I often do. And sometimes I throw out ideas on the page, I get to 3, and then I have to start really looking. But this was one where I just started writing idea after idea after idea, just vomiting ideas onto the page. Mm-hmm. And I had to sit there and go, how do I make this a list of 5?
Yeah.
And so I've set myself a rule, and that is I am saying that these are stories that I would like to see made in 2025 to go out as part of the current season of Doctor Who with the current Doctor.
Wow, okay.
So not just, let's turn this into, something. I've said, no, this is going to be adapted for Doctor Who in 2025 when we're making this recording. So that helped me to pare down my list, and it meant a few missed out and a few were disqualified, which we'll talk about in a moment. But I should get on with make my list. Number 5, I would like to see them make Shakedown, both the new adventure and the video, the direct-to-video release that was released in the early 90s, written by Terrance Dicks, starring the Sontarans. I admit part of my love for Shakedown was because I was 14 when I first saw it. It was a big part of my wilderness years and just that developmental part of Doctor Who. But at the end of the day, it's a classic story about a Rutan spy that has hidden away on a sailing yacht, a space sailing yacht, I should say. It's being pursued by the Sontarans, and at either end of the story, in the book at least, there's the Doctor sort of bookending it as he tries to stop the Rutan from changing the balance of the war and all the rest of it. And I just thought this is something that the new series could do really, really well. It would do the whole spaceship model effects really, really well, certainly better than they did on a direct-to-video budget in 1994.
Yeah.
It would do the cast really well. I could see Ncuti's Doctor sort of on the various different space stations and space cities and going to the library at the end of the book. The Sontarans, I think, would fit in really well in this, particularly the newer sort of iteration of the Sontarans. Would finally get to see a Rutan in Doctor Who. There's all these reasons why a good, solid adventure like Shakedown should be made. Mm-hmm. Number 4, I'm going for Earthaid, which is a Big Finish adaptation of a concept, not even a draft script, a concept that Andrew Cartmel and Ben Aronovich had for the aborted season 27. Yes. And many fans who came up through the Wilderness era, who've watched the McCoy DVDs and watched interviews, all know about that opening where you go into the bridge of an Enterprise-like starship and various different things are being done. Then you see that Ace is in the captain's seat and she starts giving orders, warp 10, do this, set the... Blah, blah, blah. I'll be in my ready room. Walks in, the chair turns around, the doctor's there, and she says, we'll never get away with this. And then you go on, they do a story with the Metatraxi about the politics of food aid on a galactic level and all the rest of that. And I really enjoy the Big Finish adaptation. I love the concept. I want to see that rolled out. I could see Ncuti Gatwa setting up his companion to do that as he sat in the ready room just controlling stuff. I could see the modern era really wanting to talk about the politics of hunger and aid and all of that stuff. I think it would work really, really well. Let's make Earth Aid.
Okay.
Number 3, I've also gone for a DWM comic, Rob. But I've gone for Emperor of the Daleks, which is a wonderful comic that was there around the issue 200 of DWM. It talks about the whole gap in Davros's storyline between the end of Revelation of the Daleks, where he's taken away as a prisoner, and how he ends up as the Emperor in charge of the Imperial Daleks in Remembrance of the Daleks. Part 1, the prequel, has Colin Baker. The rest of it has the McCoy Doctor. There's no reason why the Gatwa Doctor couldn't go into all of that. There's no reason you couldn't bring Absalam Dark into the new series, and I think it'd be quite fun to do as part of the new series. We have Julian Bleach now established as Davros. I think he'd be awesome in this role, actually seeing him do it all. It's just a fun comic strip with lots of classic Daleks. I want to see it made.
Okay, so he can't have legs?
Oh, I didn't want to go there, Rob.
Okay, we won't.
We won't go there. Number 2, I am now leaning hard into the New Adventures because, of course, I love the New Adventures. These two are probably not going to be shocks to long-term listeners. At number 2, I've gone with Bad Therapy, a favourite New Adventure of mine. It's one that's come up a few times over my conversations. It is such a lovely novel, but it's one where I just thought Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor is made for this story. A story set in London during the time of the race riots. Then you have, the first Black Doctor doing that. It's a story that has a gay romance very, very much at the heart of that. Ncuti Gatwa's Doctor, again, perfect for that sort of environment. It's a story all about loss and grief and sadness and learning to cope with that and how you pick your life up and you go on with it as well. It's also the story that brings back Perry, and she has to also, again, go through that process of loss and reestablishing her life and grief. And so I think all of those themes would be perfect for Gatwa's Doctor. For once, he could cry and it would be worthy. It would be worthwhile and it would be appropriate. I think it would be a great excuse to get Nicola Bryant back in the series. I would want to see Bad Therapy made in this era. And the final is a story that I think could be made in any era of the show because it's a classic. It is Mark Gatiss's Nightshade. This is just a brilliant story about loss, nostalgia. It's got a little bit of that horror that Gatiss loves so much. It really goes hard on the Doctor Who science fiction vibe. It's got all the Quatermass references. And again, I think that there is no era of the show where you cannot do 1950s isolated English village with a creepy monster. How do you not do that? I just think it's a classic. Let's make it.
Great list, Dave. Great list.
And no snaps. 10 different stories.
Yeah. No, that's great. I did say that I'd talk about this after we made our lists. One thing I'd say about my list, and it might be true of yours too, in fact it probably is, like many people, I've heard of X, Y, and Z being good stories, good audios, good novels, good comics, whatever, but I've never consumed them. So there is so much Doctor Who stuff out there, Dave, like you were saying at the start. Even when I buy it, I sometimes don't consume it. I've got some Capaldi-era BBC audios that I bought about in 2017, and I still haven't heard those. So there's just so much out there, is the point I'm making. In all mediums, it's impossible to know it all. So for me, at least, maybe for you, a list like that might not have a dear listener's favourite story on it. And that's simply because I've not experienced it. There might be the greatest story in the world out there. I've just not heard it or read it or whatever.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really, really good point. I want to talk about some of my disqualifications, Rob.
Yes, please.
So a couple were disqualified because I suddenly realised they didn't actually have the Doctor in them. So Curse of the Daleks, the play, which I think would be a great movie or a great episode if it was just made today. You'd need to change some of the attitudes, but I think it would work really well. But no Doctor, so it couldn't be a Doctor Who story. I, Davros, a classic bit of Big Finish, but no Doctor. I'd love to make both of those as spin-offs or something, but my rule about having to be made for the current era ruled out stuff like The Plotters, which is a wonderful story, but it's very, very much a Hartnell story. Romance of Crime, a great story, but it's clearly a Tom Baker and Lalla Ward story. Or even something like The Killing Ground, which I think is a wonderful, excellent cyber story. But you could not make that today. You just couldn't make something as grim and nasty as that today. A couple that also missed the list very narrowly. The Higher Science, look, it is my favourite Virgin New Adventure. I'm looking forward. It's only a couple of months away from the guys on Too Broad and Too Deep tackling that one, which I'm really looking forward to hearing, guys. I just don't know how it would quite work on the TV these days. And also Exodus. I had Exodus on my list for a couple of early drafts. I thought, wouldn't this be a wonderful adventure to have, even with the Ncuti Gatwa Doctor? But then I just thought, the Doctor palling around with Hitler, even though it's to undermine things and get history back on track, and he's still condemning the Nazis. And I don't see that as, it's a problem, the Doctor. But I just don't think it will be done with today's sensibilities. I don't think you could really do World War II properly on afternoon television and kind of get away with it. So I ruled that out. In the end, I'm glad I did, because I was able to put some other stuff in there.
Yeah, I had some runners-up. First, some that I've never experienced, like I was just mentioning a moment ago, so I can't talk to them, but people certainly do rave about the David Warner Unbound Doctor story, Sympathy for the Devil.
Oh, yes, they do.
Which has the Doctor exiled to Earth in the 1990s, and he gets paired up with an older brigadier in Hong Kong on the eve of the handover to the Chinese. That sounds fascinating to me. Why have I never listened to it?
Yeah.
Joseph Lidster's Big Finish Master is apparently one of the best stories about the Doctor and the Master ever written. I've never heard it.
Or Master, as I'm sure Joe would say.
Right, okay. And for stuff I have consumed but didn't make my list, Lance Parkin's novel Father Time is quite good. That's the 8th Doctor stuck on Earth, adopts an alien girl, giving the Doctor a daughter, long before we had the episode The Doctor's Daughter. And finally, another Big Finish called Project Twilight, which is a 6th Doctor piece. It's all dark and moody. It's part of the Forge arc, and people who know that arc will know what I'm talking about. If you've never heard it, go and listen to it. It's bloody great.
Yeah, no, some good recommendations there. Looking at your list, Rob, Chimes of Midnight, I definitely must make a point of buying that and listening to that at some point.
It's huge classic.
Yeah, no, that's everybody says that, so I really should get on that. Lung Barrow, as soon as you said that, I thought, of course. That would be amazing to see, although, again, I wonder how much it relies on the McCoy Doctor.
I'm sure you could rewrite it in a way that works. But again, it's that whole debate, and we're not going to have that debate here. Do we even need to have a Doctor origin story? I don't think we needed to at all. Anyway.
Yes, which brings me to your number one pick, Rob, where I thought Spare Parts, again, it's obvious, it's a classic. I have heard that one. In fact, a bunch of us listened to it in the car driving home from the wedding of Rob from 42 to Doomsday way back in the day.
Really?
He had his wedding in Mildura, and we all had to drive to about a 4 to 5 hour drive back to Melbourne. And somebody said, I've got this new Big Finish audio. Let's listen to it and kill some time till the footy starts. So we all listened to it. And again, I think on some level it's an obvious one to do, but have they done so many variations of cyber origin now, including, as you said, ones that lean in nuggets towards Spare Parts, that has the moment been missed?
Yeah, well, even Big Finish itself, I saw them spruiking one the other day called Genesis of the Cybermen. Yes. And I thought, haven't you done that one already?
Yes. No, that is the thing about a 61-year-old show. There are fewer and fewer original ideas, and even sometimes just by accident. It's the monkeys at typewriters. Occasionally, you just got to do the same thing.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest takeaway here, Rob, is a point that you made right at the start, which is, why don't they do more of this? Just take classic books, Big Finishes, whatever the case may be, and just adapt it for TV. Not as a direct adaptation. Do it like they did with Human Nature. Take the core, the essence, what it's about, the ideas, and turn it into TV. Take something like Dalek, which I believe sort of started in a very distant past as Jubilee on Big Finish. Changed a lot since then. But again, take these classic ideas and do something with them.
Yeah, I think they'd be so much more fulfilling than some of the stories we've got.
Yeah, I think so. And look, listeners, again, I'll be fascinated to hear your ideas for this. Dylan, given that you do a podcast which is all about things that are too hot for TV, then I would love to hear your thoughts on how we did and what you have. So thank you for submitting that to the Hat of Rassilon. Again, listeners, anything you want in the Hat of Rassilon, please send it in. There's a whole bunch of info on listeners that will come out over the next little while. But it's time for our next Next episode. Paul, right.
Okay.
Rob.
Yeah.
Rob.
Yeah. You scare me when you sound like that.
This one has been sent in by a listener.
Okay.
It's been sent in by Adrian Stark, and it's one that we augmented before it went in the hat, Rob. You may remember this one when it was submitted.
It's that one, is it?
It's that one. It was submitted, listeners, as top 5 guest characters we find most attractive.
Right.
And we thought, Rob and Dave sitting there for 20 minutes going, oh, we think this person's hot, may not make for the best podcast and may be a little uncomfortable. So we have adapted it, Adrian, I hope you don't mind, to top 5 guest characters we'd like to go on a date with.
Still quirky.
Still quirky, still out there. I think it's in the spirit, Adrian, but we felt a bit more comfortable approaching it that way. So find out how we do with that next month, listeners. Until then, I've been Dave.
I've been Rob.
And we'll make some more lists soon.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.